I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Life Today Live. I am Jordan Murphy, your host for today, and it is such a pleasure to have founders of Broken for Better in the studios with us today. We have Kurt and Denette Schaer with us, and I've been talking to them a little bit before this, and they are absolutely so much fun. So buckle up, buckle in. We want to welcome Kurt and Denette on the program with us today.
Welcome, Jordan. It's great to be here. I can't even get it out of my mouth.
No, we're honored. We're definitely honored to be here, just be able to have a conversation and talk all things marriage and maybe even a little bit more. So yeah,
yes, absolutely. One of the things that I absolutely love from, getting to know you guys a little bit more is that you guys don't want to shy away from the hard things, but really press into them. And I would say, as a newly married woman, that is one of the most difficult things. Is that something that you guys have found in your own marriage, or maybe some of, the couples that you've worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. What's crazy is we all want to have like intimate relationships, right? But intimacy is like seeing into every single aspect. And so it's crazy that a lot of couples that we see have struggles, obviously, with allowing their spouse into all areas of their life. And yet, even in ministry, we can only present our best. And so when we talk about the hard things and the vulnerable things, we give others access to talk about the real and vulnerable things in their own marriage. So hopefully that's what we try to do. Yeah, we love that. We love that. That's
incredible. And I think, if I were a couple coming to you, or whenever my husband and I have sought advice or help, in the past, it is so freeing, and just it feels like such a safe place whenever the people that you're seeking advice or wisdom from can come from such a real and raw and vulnerable place themselves. And so I bet that's what's made your ministry so successful in building marriages for the kingdom. I've got to know, how did Broken for Better come about? How did God call you to this? Walk us through the timeline.
It's actually really crazy, Jordan. We've been married 28 years, and we met in high school. So
high school sweetheart.
Yeah, there it is, right there. Got in the same math class. I tutored her a little bit. You know what I mean?
Not true.
I bet you tutored him. It's fine.
Yeah, we like to say that he was a senior. I was a sophomore. So let's be real.
Okay. Yeah. Let's clear this up.
But Denette really walked closely with the Lord, and I did not. And so she actually received counsel not to marry me. Honestly, and I was not the guy that she should have. But anyway, we get married right when 7 months after she graduated. We got married. In the first 8 years, was a lot of infidelity on my part. There's verbal and emotional abuse in our home. I had hobbies that were not the best, and lifestyle that wasn't great. And so my home was not a safe place, honestly. My wife was faithful to read a book over me. Even when I wasn't in it and about it, she read over me. Power of Praying Wife. Just shout out to that book. And then in 2006, I was walking out my door one day and fell to my knees, gave my life to the Lord, stood up, looked at my wife. She said, "What was that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just gave my life to the Lord, and I need to go to Bible college." And so a month and a half later, I was in Bible college. And from that time, what's crazy, Jordan, is from that time, about 6 months later, God put us on a staff. I was on a church staff, and marriages started getting thrown in front of us. Now, mind you, we're not even really that healed. The infidelity hadn't come out. It was still a secret in my life. My wife didn't know it at that point. And God is throwing these marriages in front of us. And so we just started learning and trying to figure out, hey, how do we encourage others? Ours was a mess, but how do we encourage others? And then over the years, God just put more and more and more marriages in front of us. And all we knew was that the authenticity of our story, who we were, was what we could give. 7 years after giving my life to the Lord, the infidelity did come out.
The news of it. It wasn't still happening.
It was not still happening. I had been 7 years that hadn't happened, but she asked me, "Hey, have you ever been unfaithful?" And so I had to tell her, and we went through about 2 years of, forgiveness and therapy and counseling. And then again, God, right after the news came out, God put a couple in front of us that was dealing with infidelity. And it's been wild at how God has used our story. But now over a period of time, we just got more and more comfortable with it, of God's redemption of it. Obviously don't like it, but God is using it in mighty ways. 2019, we stood on our first platform and shared our story publicly. And at that moment began to see the gates that were opened up in so many marriages that were dealing with the same type of issues that we had walked through many years earlier. Mm-hmm. And so 2022, May 1st of 2022, we stepped outside the walls of a church. I was an executive pastor. We stepped outside the walls of a church and just began full-time marriage ministry, speaking at conferences and doing counseling and coaching and premarital. And we do podcasts and so, I mean, just all the things marriage. And so it has been truly amazing. And the fact that we get to do it together as best friends and we get to live this life and walk out the thing that we love is unbelievable.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. You know, backing up from the beginning, because this is so much and I'm so excited to dive in. Denette, like, just as a wife, I put myself in your shoes, right? Like, you got this counsel to not marry him, and then you go through, is 8 years correct? This time of 8 years of a marriage that's really, really difficult. What led you to stay? What led you to keep praying? And did you have hope in those moments?
If I'm honest, there were a lot of moments of hope and a lot of moments of no hope. Mm-hmm. I remember one day looking at him and saying, I believe, because I really did. I really felt like I could see so much potential in him, and I was in love with this man and the potential. And that is not advice I would give any young woman that's dating. And honestly, he had gone to church, so he knew the church answers. But when I look back, there wasn't fruit, right? Mm-hmm. There wasn't fruit. And so, like, we tried to teach our kids growing up, be fruit inspectors. You don't have to be judgmental, but weigh the fruit and see if there's fruit. Anyhow, and there was no fruit. So moving on throughout our marriage, there was a time when I looked at him and I said, I believe you're going to be an amazing man. I just don't know that I'll be around to see it. Because our marriage was so broken and there was no trust. And so we had 3 small boys at that time, and I'm praying the paint off the walls, but I'm like, I don't even know that you can honor these prayers because I'm so angry. And so when he gave his heart to Christ, and our story is different than a lot of stories, God had never given me a release. And I don't know why. Now I believe that I know why, because God is using that brokenness to help so many other couples walking through similar dark valleys. But I didn't have a release. God would not give me a release. And so all I knew was to pray until he gave me release. And I am thankful. I know it might sound crazy, but I'm thankful that the story of the infidelity at the beginning of our marriage didn't come out until I got to see some years of health, because I don't know that I would have had the capacity to stay because we were so broken. Yeah. But God's timing just allowed a lot of healing in the years after, so that I was able to rebuild trust.
I'll tell you, Jordan, it is something to behold when you find the book that your wife used to pray over you. Yeah. And you find the notes that she wrote in the margins, and she wrote on the pages, tear-stained pages where she had wept over prayers that she was praying. Man, I'll never forget finding that book and just being like so humbled that even in my brokenness, I had a spouse that was praying the paint off the wall, and to see God's faithfulness and that healing, and then how he was using the story. It was just a moment. It was a moment I'll never forget, honestly, when I found that book.
You know, and whenever she told you, I believe you'll be an amazing man, but I'm not sure I'll be around to see it. What did that feel like to you? Did that hit deep? Did that inspire change for you, or did?
Well, at that moment, I already thought I was an amazing man.
That's so real. That's so real.
Well, the arrogance, I was like, it is what it is. I thought I was great. I was living the life I wanted. I was selfish. I was prideful. I was arrogant. And I'm like, and I just didn't have a heart that loved and lavished the things of the Lord. I knew everything. I knew the answers. We went to church. I mean, like I was in an accountability group. Like I was in all the things. Even my accountability group had zero idea who I was. And so it was just, I had a mask that was so thick that even when she uttered those words, now my heart so longs for my best friend that she would utter those words now and it would just shatter me. Like I couldn't even imagine repeating, like saying that back then. But my wife says something to a lot of people in a lot of conferences that we speak at. She said, I've been married one time to two different men.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I stood up from that 5-minute prayer, it's been radical what God did in my life. I'm a completely different person, and I know it. She knows it, and the people that have been in our journey for a long time just know what God did. So yeah, I mean, it was obviously no one wants to hear those words, but at the time I had such scales on my eyes that I don't think I really saw the gravity of it.
And I think that's so honest, and people need to hear it, because a lot of marriages are walking through that. And I think what's so interesting is just how you say, like, on paper, if you're looking at your life, you're in the accountability group, you're doing all the things to be a quote unquote successful Christian man, right? Everything should be going great. But Denette, you talked about, he was not bearing fruit. The fruit was not there. Could you share a little bit? Maybe somebody's not familiar with what that looks like. How could we be looking for that fruit?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the scripture and it talks about fruit being love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness.
Yeah, there was none of that.
That's the fruit, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't have to we write these lists, as we're dating, and I want this and I want that. I'm telling you, if you just look for the fruit, look for the fruit, be a fruit inspector. Are they loving? Are they kind? Are they patient? And obviously everyone's human and we're prone to being selfish, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, is this person walking with Jesus? And so to have someone who wasn't, and then to have someone who had an encounter with Christ and then begin to bear such beautiful fruit. This man is so vulnerable with all of the yuckiness that sometimes my heart almost breaks because of what others may think as he shares, his rawness. And I'll never forget the first time we stepped on a platform. I struggled the first 2 weeks before, or the first 2 weeks leading up to the conference. I was like, I don't know that I want to do this. I don't want to be this real. Like, at this point, you're so far removed from that man that you were. And here you are, a pastor in this church, and what will people think of you? And yet God kept saying, no, this is your story. And we know that the word says we overcome by what? The blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And yet we are so prone to usually turn away from our true testimony because it's not really pretty. And yet God uses that. And so when he multiplies, he takes the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, he combines those two, he makes beauty. And, his word says he makes beauty out of ashes, but that just sounds pretty to put on a wall and, make it some nice little crochet thing. But God actually uses it. Like he, take it off the t-shirt and use it. Like he actually uses our stories when we let him.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because some of our favorite stories of the Bible are these testimonies that are such radical change. But yet when we see it in other people's lives, like sometimes people just go to judgment, and it's just like, oh my goodness, that is not where we should be. We should be in celebration for what God has done. And so I think it's so incredible that you're just going so boldly and sharing and giving all glory to the Lord. And, I've got to know, so as we have this huge testimony, you guys start going through the restoration process. But what's so interesting to me is after you get down on your knees and you pray that prayer, it's almost like we get on a fast track, right? You're going to Bible college and then we're on at a church and then you're helping these couples in their marriage. But you said you were still kind of having restoration at the same time. I think there's a common misconception, and maybe share your thoughts on this. A lot of times we think we need to get at a certain point in our own lives or in our own marriages before God can use us. What do you think about that?
That's a great, and you actually worded that unbelievably, honestly, Jordan. I think for us, because God did such a radical thing, and for me, I mean, in that moment, it was like, oh my goodness, I know my identity as a child of God. I am loved. And yes, I was broken, but man, I know what he did for me. And Christ would die for me. Man, I was a kid in the gutter. Like I lived in the gutter and man, he came and died for me. I think that story, it never left me that, man, I lived in the gutter and everybody I know lives in the gutter. Now, many times people like to clean themselves up and pretend they don't live in there, but they got these areas of their life. And so I was just kind of like, hey, I'm going to attack hell with a water pistol. Here's my story. It's all I know. Like, I don't know where you're at, man. We were broken, now again, Jordan, a little bit is the infidelity part, so the massive part of our story, didn't come out for 7 years. So even when we're working on relationships, yes, we're talking about trust and communication, things that we're working on, right? The emotional and verbal abuse, that had definitely gone away. So we're able to tackle these things, but we really didn't tackle the real issue, you know, that broken trust, that terrible foundation that I had laid. That came when more healing came, and we had a little more under us, and God had done so much in my life at that point that when it finally came out, it was almost like, oh man, I've been living with this shame for so long. And she asked, 7 years, she asked, and man, I released it. But the crazy part, Jordan, and this is the part many people I don't think like, is in that moment, 7 years later, I took that brick that had been on my chest, that shame and that guilt, and I released it. And man, in 2013, did I feel free as a bird. Yeah. But I took that weight and I dumped it on her chest now. And now it was, as a spouse, how do I come alongside of my best friend and go, man, I just threw this weight on you. And I see you now stuck upside down like a turtle. How do I help you out of this thing? And it was just a whole nother part of our journey. Our journey's been so crazy, but to see how God uses that. So yeah, the redemption, I just never shied away from it. I'm gonna be the first to tell you, yeah, I'm broken. I mean, I stand on platforms all around this country, but I'm as broken as get, but I passionately love the Lord.
Yeah, I think we walk with the both and, right? And I think it's, you know, we are healed in a lot of ways, and yet we're working on a lot of things in a lot of ways. But when we're real with that, even when we sit in our coaching room with other clients and we're like, yeah, there's still areas of communication, or, you know, there's always areas we can get better at. We don't have to be perfect in order to love people well. And you can love people well with your stories and with what God's done, and also what God is still doing. Yeah. It's the both. It's the both and.
Yeah. You know, Denette, I wonder, like, what made you ask in that moment 7 years later? Was it something that maybe was always deep down, like in the back of your head, or did God just like pop it into your brain one day? Like, walk us through that.
It's a little bit of, again, both and. I had some questions on some things and thoughts, but I honestly, this is going to sound so churchy and whatever, but it was Holy Spirit. Yeah. I just felt like Holy Spirit was saying, you need to ask. You need to ask. And without sharing too much or going into a really long story, what was crazy was, I'll never forget, it was Easter Sunday, 2013. And he had an encounter with a visitor at church. He's pastor on staff, and he welcomes this guy and says, hey, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What's your story? And this guy literally says, man, God's so good. He's restored my marriage. And basically goes into this whole testimony about infidelity and how he had been unfaithful, and his wife. And my husband comes home from that encounter, and I said, I can't help, but I have to ask. I feel like Holy Spirit's telling me to ask you, have you ever been unfaithful? And it was almost as if God had prepared his heart to be vulnerable and real, as he's telling me, today's the day. Yeah. And we reached a brokenness that we thought at that time was the darkest we would ever be. Yeah. And got a lot of help. We got some people in our corner that had walked through trust issues, and had walked through infidelity, had walked through that road, and they had rebuilt. And I knew in that moment that that's what God was calling me to. I wouldn't say it was pretty. I remember crying on a bathroom floor and saying, God, I don't want this story. I feel so alone. And I had a peace that he's like, I'm right here. I'm right here. Yeah. And so that's really when our restoration began.
I think that's so powerful. And what's so beautiful is how you're talking about how God prepared not only you, but both of you. And then, Kurt, for you to be honest, you know, you could have definitely just hid and allowed Satan to continue to like throw the guilt and the shame, but you allowed the Lord to free you from that. But then also a lot of props for recognizing, you know, what, even though you took the brick off of yourself, like how that's placed on her, and how you guys can move forward together in freedom. Yep. And it's incredible how a lot of times what God wants us to go forth and do, we end up walking through ourselves. We don't realize, like, oh my gosh, God really does take all the things, work together for his good and his glory. You know, how do you feel like helping these couples in things that you've been through yourself? How do you feel like that's been a strength for you? Because I can't imagine, you know, maybe trying to help somebody with infidelity, but not walking through it yourself.
Yeah.
So
I'm actually going to hop in here. I think I'm like, this one's a little bit on me. Very early on, I didn't want to go to anyone that hadn't walked through it myself. I felt so broken and I felt so isolated that for me to go to someone that gave me 4 ways to forgive my husband and to trust, and for someone to give me that had not walked through it, I would have really struggled believing them, because it was that real and it was that raw. And God gave me a beautiful soul that had walked through something similar, and she just ministered to me. And I'm going to be real, that I'll never forget going to her that first week going, I feel like we need to walk away from, ministry and all these things. And she's like, okay, but God's done so much redemption in you. I don't know that you have to walk away. I think you have to be real. God's still redeeming. And so even in that moment, she was challenging us to push into the hard and use the hard to help others. And so for me, it was going to someone that had been there. So now when we sit with other couples, unfortunately, we know what that feels like. And that can be hard. And I would be lying if I didn't say we don't have to some days process as ourselves as a couple when we leave that room from helping someone. And I have to say, okay, whoa, that opened some wounds. That opened some thoughts that I had thought about in a long time. But we're capable of getting in that ditch because we've been there. We also know what it feels like to dig our way out. Yeah. If that makes sense.
I think for us, that's the biggest part of this. If we weren't able to use our testimony, if God didn't take our story and offer it in a vessel of hope for another couple, well, then you look at everything you went through like, man, I just was awful. Yeah. That's a sad story. But the fact of the matter now is, Jordan, you have so many couples, church, unchurched, ministers, not ministers, that this becomes their story. Yeah. And I think for us to be able to go, wow, okay, let's settle the dust for a minute. Yeah. You're looking at a couple that 20 years ago walked through this, like 10 years ago, like had to go through all the therapy and try, like we're here telling you 10 exits up, it can be okay. Yeah. But here's the process to get there. Yeah. A lot of people want what we got, but they're not willing to do what we did. And we tell people all the time, this is a road. Like, you're about to walk it's going to be hard. And you're going to have days that you love us and days you hate us. But the fact of the matter is, you got to fight for each other. Let God continue to work in you. It's all part of that sanctification process. Like, every day we're looking more like God. And so he's going to reveal parts of us that are dark, that don't look like him, so that we can look more like him tomorrow than we did yesterday. And we were just about it. And we're thankful now that it is not easy. There are some days that those scars get opened up and they become wounds again that we have to process out. But luckily now we have enough tools and enough years that we're just like, this is another vulnerable conversation that we have to have. So
yeah. And you guys have encountered so much grief, and you shared that you thought that this was going to be the hardest thing that you walked through. Could you share with us what came next that actually was the hardest thing that you guys walked through as a couple?
Yeah. So actually we launched Broken for Better. We were in the walls of the church doing a lot of marriage ministry, and we were doing so much. We thought, now's the time. We knew that God was telling us now's the time to do this full time. So May 1st of 2022, we stepped outside the walls of the church to do Broken for Better full time. And 29 days later, our 17-year-old son passed away in a single car accident, him and his girlfriend. And we were faced with a brokenness that we had never, ever experienced. And, it's crazy. We originally had a different name for the name of our ministry. And I told him that just doesn't feel right. And I felt like God gave us the name Broken for Better. And I at that time was so angry because we were so broken. And so we know our marriage has been broken for better, but now we were faced with a different aspect of grief that we had never had to deal with. And unfortunately, like he had said, putting that brick on top of my chest was something he could try to heal and try to fix. But now we both had this weight of grief that we had to figure out how to walk together with and how to figure out together.
That was really crazy, Jordan. We were so excited to start Broken for Better. Yeah. Just to travel the world and talk about marriage and what God's design and what he desired of it. And we had no idea that there was an aspect of marriage that we had never broached in this grief. And when that happened, it it was a left hook. I mean, because then you're wrestling a lot of stuff. You know, you're the grief of losing a child. Obviously, your family looks completely different. But now you're battling trust with the Lord. Like you're having to try to find joy. You're having to try to find hope. Like all these promises that you knew to be true now are questions. And, you know, and I remember standing on the side, you know, when the vehicle ended up in the bottom of a pond. And when I remember standing on the side of that pond, just like praying, like, God, I know all the stories of you raising people from the dead. Like, I know you can do this. Yeah. Why are you not? Like, why am I not one of these? Like, what's the problem here? My son was going to Bible college. He loved people, had a desire to be a pastor, had just spoke a message at age 17 and led kids to the Lord. Like, I mean, this was a real, Logan was just, I mean, so it just made no sense. And so there was really this aspect of this journey that we had to learn that we just never saw coming. Yeah, I mean, it was something that us, our family, our community, our church, it was a left hook out of nowhere.
Yeah. And not only do you have to lead yourselves through that in your marriage, but also your children. So as a family, I can't imagine the impact. What kind of steps do you take forward? Because you have this story of incredible redemption, and even that mentor in your life, Denette, that said, God is still redeeming. And then you get to this moment. How do you continue on, even in the day-to-day, even without Broken for Better, right? Like, how do you continue on just waking up every day, going forward with your family, trying to hold on to hope?
Yeah. It was pretty early on, Jordan. And looking back, I can't see this as anything besides a miracle. It was, I think it was the day after, if I remember correctly, we had family, you know, converging, people coming to our home, and I just remember I was wailing. I wouldn't even say weeping. I was wailing. We had just had a graduation party the week before. So all of his graduation decorations are still up. His photos are still everywhere, you know? And I'm just like, just wrestling with like, this cannot be reality. Like, wake me up from this nightmare. And I remember pouring out, I'm wailing, and I started to declare, God, if this is going to be part of our story, I need you to make it count. This has to count. And what we meant by that, or what I meant by that in that moment, was that heaven would look different. That if God would see fit to allow this to pass through his hands, that he would make heaven look different because of it. And I will never, ever forget. My husband was on the right of me. My oldest son was on the left, and my middle son sat on my lap as a grown married man, like a toddler. And he just started to sing over all of us, Christ is our firm foundation. He's never let me down. Now, I'd be honest if I would say I can almost not stand that song these days, because it's so overwhelming, and it just takes me back to that moment. So, and there's so many songs that do that for our family. But I would say we have a lot of days we get it right, and a lot of days that are really messy. But it goes back to that both ends. And we have tried as a family and as a couple to continue to take the next right step. And that's sometimes really, really small. And I say often, some days that's making the bed and getting out of it so that I don't stay in it. Some days it's sitting on a beautiful phone call with you, Jordan, and talking about what God is capable of doing in the realness and the rawness. But it's just taking that one small step towards what you know is right. Even if it's hard, it doesn't make all of the yuckiness go away.
I got a piece of art on my forearm, and it was a verse, Isaiah 55:8-9. And I think for 3 to 6 months afterwards, I had to just stare at that thing, because it just says, like, my ways are not your ways, and heaven's ways are higher than the ways of the earth. And I think for me, I declared that and got it tattooed on me. I declared it in a season where we were on the mountaintop, and man, God was the greatest, you know what I mean? And I remember that after that accident for 3 to 6 months, I remember staring at that and really having to go, okay, I planted these seeds in a great season. I've got to stand by, and I've got to harvest this fruit in this hard season, because he was the same God then as he is now. And I just remember that make it count mantra became an everyday thing. Like, man, if this is going to be a thing, if we're not making it count, then again, we look at this like, well, that's just awful. This is just a terrible thing. Like, man, well, sorry for us, you know.
Yeah.
But when we get in front of high school teams and college teams and church teams and men's and women's events and marriage and you begin to offer hope in the midst of despair, and you see lights come on in other people, you realize like, okay, Logan lived a life of legacy, and it's not in vain. His life is still changing lives. And wow, God is so faithful that even in the midst of our mess, man, God has got a message that he's allowing us to speak. So it just became our make it count, became our mantra. And still to this day, it's everyone around here knows that Kurt and Denette, you're going to hear make it count at some point, because that's literally the life we live.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you would still change it tomorrow if you could.
Man, I would change it tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and you guys talk about how you've been there for so many other people, right? And how you've shared this amazing legacy and testimony with so many people. How has your community shown up for you as you've shown up for them in the past through all of these trials, through all of this grief?
Wow. What's wild is, I'm going to be real honest.
I'm waiting to see how you actually answer this.
What's wild, Jordan, is how many people showed up for us that we didn't expect. Yeah. I think what was wild for us was the people that you kind of expect to show up sometimes don't. And that was hard for us. That was another level of grief that we didn't know would be there, another layer of that. But I wrote a book, and in that book, I talk about dirt sitters, and we had some amazing dirt sitters. And what I mean by that is Job had these friends that showed up, and for the first 7 days, they didn't say anything. They just sat in the dirt with him. It wasn't until they opened their mouths and they tried to fix him, or they tried to figure out why this was happening, that they actually kind of caused some more harm, right? But those first 7 days, they were just present. And, God's presence is so much more powerful than anything anybody can give us. And so that's what we want to be as people walk through hard things. We want to run towards it when everyone else runs away, and be dirt sitters. Like, how do we just sit in the dirt with you and show you that you're not alone and help you walk through really hard things?
I think we realized, Jordan, something that as a pastor, at that point, I had been a pastor nearly 20 years, 18 years. And I learned something even about myself. Wow. We, many times as believers, are amazing at sympathy, but we are terrible with empathy. Man, I'm sorry for you, and I'm going to pray for you if I remember. But to really go sit in somebody's pain, many times it drudges up our own hurt, our own trauma, our own past. We don't know what to say. We're scared we'll say the wrong thing, and so we don't say anything at all. And I just learned, like, there's been people, Jordan, that I had to go back and repent to, that as a pastor, I didn't handle their pain well. And in my darkest moment, I realized, oh my word, I need to ask for forgiveness. And I would just challenge every listener that may hear this, Jesus never ran from it, always ran to it. And I would just say, like, man, let us be known as believers, that if there's a fire, we run into it. And though you may not know what to say, the greatest line that you could ask somebody is, hey, how do I best love you today? And that may be a conversation, that may be prayer, that may be lunch, that may be a lot of things, but just learning to love people in their pain is something that we are working on every single day, because we know that those people that did that well for us, they will never be forgotten in the Schaer household.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, and it's so interesting because a lot of times it really can be boiled down to the simplest of things, as sitting with people or asking the question, how can I best serve you? Because I've been on, both sides of the grief, right? The one experiencing it and the one that's supporting the people walking through it. And sometimes when you're on the support side, it is a little bit intimidating, and you hit the nail on the head, because really you're going to a different level of intimacy in that relationship that you've maybe never experienced before. And so I think these tools are really, really incredible to empower people to not shy away, but press into, and really not only, say that we'll pray for people, but walk like Christ and love them like that in those deepest and darkest moments. And, as we continue, I've got to know, like, this grief, this situation, of course, this can really break down marriages, but how did you see it strengthen yours?
You know, we, in the early days, you know, we do all these marriage ministry tools and all these things that we help others with. And we have, you know, the 5 love languages and all these things. And during our grief, we realized that, man, when you're walking through that, I didn't want words of affirmation. I didn't need quality time. He didn't need physical time. We were so broken that, man, how do we love each other when everything else goes out the window? The tools that you learned aren't available. Like, you're just trying to make it through the day. And honestly, I think it was so much of just the Lord, but loving him right where he was at and him loving me right where I was at. We grieved extremely differently, extremely. I isolated a lot. I needed a lot of quiet time. I had a lot of social anxiety. He needed to be out. He needed to be serving. And so giving each other space for him not to say, man, I feel like you're not grieving correctly, or for me to say the same thing to him. We had to give each other space to grieve and to be exactly who God created us to be individually. And that brought us together, making sure that when he was having a bad day, I was caring for his heart. When I was having a bad day, he was nurturing mine. And every day looked different. But just being faithful to check in and make sure that we were doing our best to take care of our own heart was the best thing that we could do for the other one.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And your testimony is incredible, you guys. I want you to get connected with them. But maybe you're listening right now and you're thinking, I haven't gone through any of this, or maybe not yet, right? But we're all either going into a pit, in the pit, or walking out of it. But Kurt and Denette, you know, have you ever heard people say, well, you know, I'm not in the pit, or I'm not having these issues, so I don't think that I need marriage counseling, or we don't think we need any help. You know, what do you say to those couples that may be listening right now?
Listen, I will say that, yes, we hear that all the time. And, you know, we have learned this now doing what we do full time. We have learned that many times people treat their marriage like the check engine light in their car. That thing comes on and you realize, well, something ain't right, but hey, it's still running, so we'll just keep on going. And it's not until your car shuts down that you're like, uh-oh, I need a mechanic. Well, the car's been trying to tell you for 2 years that you needed a mechanic, you know? And so we really are trying to debunk this thing of going, hey, listen, everybody can get better. We can learn new tools. We can learn new ways to love. And if you preemptively attack a problem, many times it's so much easier and so less painful to do that. And so we have couples, literally, we have a couple that's been married less than a year, and we meet with them every single month. And we talk about the greatest stories, where they're at. Like, man, we can't believe that within a year, you know, there's already struggles in this area. We never thought this would be a thing, you know, like we want to have great communication. We want to have great intimacy. What does this look like? And so being able to catch that on the front side is unbelievable. So I would say to every listener, don't wait until you may go sit with a coach or a counselor and just go, man, it is awesome. We have the greatest marriage on the planet, but how do we get better? And let them teach you a new tool. Wow. Who knew we could have got better in that area? No idea. Dee and I do this every single day. And we go to conferences, we watch podcasts, we sit with people, and we learn, because we do this every day and know, you know what? We could be better.
Yes.
I mean, just so I would just encourage you, don't let I think the enemy would have you believe you don't need it and would isolate you. And then when you do need it, it's just too late. So I'll just encourage you, no, preemptively attack that problem and have fun doing it. Counseling like that is fun. That's fun to go talk about things are wonderful. How do we dream together? That's when it's fun. To do it when it's fun.
We go and get coaches for a lot of things, you know, we get business coaches, you know, as athletes in high school, we both had coaches, you know, but when it comes to one of the things that's going to be with us our entire life, if we do it well, is a spouse and a partner. We're so apprehensive to actually get a coach or to get someone to speak into it. And yet it's beautiful when it's done out of, you know, a sincere heart. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We think, oh, I can do it alone. No, we'll just keep it to ourselves, rather than, you know, seeking advice and wisdom from the people who have gone before you. So I love it. We're going to have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. How can we always keep improving? How can we always keep growing, and not just think that we've arrived, but how can we continue walking that journey well together? Kurt and Denette, thank you so much for being with us today. It was truly such an honor and a pleasure to hear from you guys today, to hear your hearts, share your testimony. Where can our audience get connected with you?
Absolutely. We're on all different social media platforms, Broken for Better, TikTok. Our assistant has us on TikTok because we don't know what we're doing, but
You
TikTok,
gotta be on TikTok,
Instagram,
girl.
YouTube, Facebook, and then obviously our website is just brokenforbetter.com.
Perfect. And you guys, here is that website right here. Make sure you check out brokenforbetter.com. Thank you all so much for listening with us today on Life Today Live. We love you. Prayers and blessings for your day, and we will see you next time.
The will of God. He has given us the will to choose to come, to choose to bend our necks, to choose to bend our necks, and to choose to learn.